Hello everyone, welcome back to the Autismo Dynamite. And I want to say sorry for the framing in a few couple of videos. I've been pointed out on that mistake, so hopefully me getting a bit closer to you guys is better. But anyway, hi again. And about like a night ago from now, Jai Opataya just recently put on an absolute masterclass performance in which he beaten Brandon Glanton by unanimous decision to become the new ZUFFA World Champion at Cruiserweight.
Yes, you must be so proud of beating Kaiba and winning the coveted bronze medal. Oh, that never gets old.
I'm proud of you for winning, Joey. You're my hero. Shut the f*** up, Tristan.
Now, okay. And I feel like this, now that he's become the first, like, ZUFFA World Champ, I feel like this is where ZUFFA is beginning to have maybe a bit of a big impact. And if I'm going to be honest, I feel like it's maybe a bit of a bad impact. And I was thinking of taking this opportunity to maybe talk with you guys what my issues with ZUFFA boxing are. Especially considering that they are wanting to fix broken boxing, as they put it. So yeah, this is basically what this video is about. Just basically going through my issues with ZUFFA as a whole, as of right now. Now, I do want to make it clear, right? There are some things about ZUFFA that I do think are, to an extent, positive, right? For instance, I do actually like the idea of like finally getting the best of the best fighting each other, which obviously is has been a massive issue with boxing for well over since since Floyd Mayweather came into boxing, where it came less about fighting the best and more about retiring undefeated and wanting to preserve the O and making people think that you were some legendary boxer because no one could beat you. But I like how Dana's coming in now to show people that you don't need to be retire undefeated to be considered a great boxer. Some of the greatest boxers of all time have retired with losses on their record and yet are still considered great. Like if we go by Floyd's logic of no one's beaten me, so why aren't I pound for pound number one? If we go by his logic, then is Muhammad Ali worse than Joe Calzaghe? Is Pernell Whitaker worse than Andre Ward? Is Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. considered lesser than Ricardo Lopez? I'm sure some of these examples you could probably argue aren't exactly correct, but nevertheless, I think I'm going on a bit of a tangent here. I think at the end of the day, I really appreciate that he's trying to make the best fight the best now, especially considering with like Dana White's personality and how well he's done with the UFC. Right, I think with the kind of stuff, the success he's had in the UFC, I think he has the potential to make a really good impact in boxing. If it's anything like the UFC, I could see it being a massive hit, especially thanks to Turki Al-Sheikh, who's obviously in ownership of the Ring Magazine belt, which initially I thought would be the main belt all these fighters would be fighting for to consider who's the true world champion. So I think there's a lot of potential for ZUFFA to have done good. However, talking about the Ring Magazine belt and how I thought that was going to be the original belt, that leads me on to my first issue. So obviously the ZUFFA belt is officially now considered the main belt at ZUFFA boxing, where it's basically seen as the big world title now. If you're a ZUFFA champion, you are considered the greatest boxer of the division. Really. Because if you're trying to make the best fight the best, and if you're trying to And if Dana White's trying to get his wish in boxing to have only one true world title, why the fuck would you make another belt? Especially if they're talking about fixing broken boxing. If anything, I think like the amount of belts we have is one of the reasons why so many people consider the sport broken, because like there's just too many belts. Like even if we're just talking about the main 4 belts, it's just fucking just a mess. Like personally for me, and I'll say this as well, I actually think having just one belt is maybe a bit probably maybe a bit how should I put it? I feel like it's maybe not like enough in my opinion. Like with like personally for me, I feel like boxing was at its best in terms of like undisputed champions when it was just 3 belts, the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF. Like no disrespect to the WBO, but I feel like when it was just 3 belts, it was a lot more. It was like the big 3, like the 3 musketeers of boxing, I guess, and I feel like it was a lot more easier to make undisputed fights with just 3 belts. And I feel like especially with like multiple belts, it can help like create massive like champion versus champion fights. Like for instance, we had Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk, undefeated champion versus undefeated champion, to determine who's the undisputed champion. You had Bivol Beterbiev fighting undefeated versus undefeated the first time round to determine undisputed. Point is, I feel like if you have, like with multiple belts, right? Obviously, not too many, but if you have some belts, you can have like some really epic matchups to determine who's like truly the greatest. Like with Mike Tyson, for instance, fighting 3 separate world champions to prove that he was truly the greatest. Vander Holyfield beating 3 separate cruiserweight champions to determine he was the greatest. Like these guys basically beating multiple champions in the same weight class to determine to show that they are the GOAT of that division and of that era. Whereas I feel like just having one belt, if anything, is maybe a bit I just feel like it just maybe like takes a lot of the fun out of like seeking glory, especially considering that if you do win the belt, you only really have 2 options from there, which is either defend it against multiple different rising stars, which means you will eventually have to rematch so many people that you potentially beat so convincingly, or you have to move up in weight to find new challenges. Which leads me on to my next issue. So, obviously, Dana White, he's officially announced that he's wanting to get rid of some weight classes when it comes to his organisation of boxing, right? So, as far as I'm aware, they've gotten rid of all the subcategories in weight classes outside of, like, heavyweight. And they're also getting rid of flyweight and minimum weight. Personally, for me, I honestly feel like that's kind of maybe... I feel like that could end up being maybe a bit bad going into the future, because personally for me, like one of my main issues with UFC is not being able to move up in weight in order to find new challenges. Because in UFC, right, they don't have subcategories. Like they don't have a super welterweight or a light middleweight or however you want to phrase it, or whatever. So, at minimum, for a UFC fighter, they have to gain, like, 10 pounds just to move up in weight. Keep in mind, like, if you're, like, a minimum weight, that's 4 divisions you could conquer by gaining 10 pounds. If you're a super featherweight, you could gain 10 pounds and become a 3-division world champion instead of a 2-division. Like, I just feel like... And especially considering with UFC, right, like, I've looked into it, and as far as I'm aware, the most number of weight divisions that a UFC fighter has ever conquered is 3. In fact, a recent example of a UFC fighter, Conor McGregor, was like, I'm pretty sure it was recent. Yeah, it was pretty recent. As or like, 21st century fighter. He was obviously like the first man to, as far as I'm aware, to claim world championship in 2 different weight classes. Keep in mind, like before him, there were multiple weight division champion or multiple boxers who became multiple division world champions. Like I'm pretty sure before, as far as I'm aware, before Conor McGregor became 2 division UFC champion. There was Oscar De La Hoya in boxing, who became a 6 division world champion. And maybe even before then, you had Manny Pacquiao, who became an 8 division world champion, which I think that kind of goes to show that there could be issues going down the line with like getting rid of the subcategories, especially considering that a lot of those subcategories have like really big names as well. Like for instance, and now I'm not going to be naming any of the ones that that may potentially retire in the future or are retired, but super middleweight, you have Hamza Shiraz, Diego Pacheco, and okay, if you want to count him as not retired right now, you also have Canelo Alvarez, arguably the biggest pay-per-view star in boxing right now. Super welterweight, Jaron Boots Ennis, Virgil Ortiz, Josh Kelly, or actually maybe he's not a big star or whatever. Sebastian Fundora. Hell, I mean, with his skinny build or whatever, and the fact that he towers over every single person in that division, he probably would have been perfect for making it into a superstar. Super lightweight division, Shakur Stevenson, Keyshawn Davis, Richardson Hitchens. Swear there was more. Okay, right. Super featherweight, Emmanuel Navarrete. Recently, to an extent, Anthony Kikatse. I guess you could count him as a super featherweight now, Lee Wood. Super bantamweight, Naoya Inoue, Jonto Nakatani. Super flyweight, Jesse Bam Rodriguez. And okay, I'll give you flyweight and light flyweight. I can barely name some fighters in both divisions. But minimum weight, Oscar Collazo. Like, there's so many like lucrative fighters in those weight divisions, and there could be many more that I'm missing out. Point is, there's so many people in those weight that you could make great stars, but by not including the subcategories, not only are you preventing your boxers from like going up and seeking new challenges, you're also excluding ones that could be very profitable for you if you could get your hands on them. And speaking of lucrative or talented boxers, yeah, personally for me, and to be fair, you could probably expect it considering that ZUFFA's a pretty new thing or whatever, or promotional company. But considering that they want to get eyes on their shows, they've barely got many like lucrative fighters on their stay, right. And look, I'll give them credit, right. I've seen some of their fighters on some of their shows, and they have put on some entertaining fights. Personally, as far as the fights I've seen, I don't think there's been like a bad one. I'll give them credit. But thing is though, is that if you're trying to get eyes on your thing or whatever, in order to try and create this change, or you need like some big names or whatever. Especially with, like, the main event, and I just personally don't think they've got that. Like, you have Callum Walsh, which, as far as I'm aware, I only know him from being the co-main event of Canelo Crawford. You got, I believe, Jose Valenzuela, who obviously he's a former world champion, but not a well-known one outside of beating Isak Cruz. You have F.A. Jagba against Charles Martin, which I don't really think you can consider that much of a good one, considering that Charles Martin is like 40 years old and is really only known for putting on an absolute terrible performance against AJ, and apparently also walks himself like a god. And most recently you had Jai Opetaia versus Brandon Glanton, where, if I'm being honest, Jai Opetaia, great boxer, but not the most well-known name. Probably one of the reasons why Zidane Ramirez hasn't fought him yet, because he's a big risk and a low reward kind of fight. And Brandon Glanton, I only really know him for his fight against Chris Billum-Smith on the undercard of Eubank Jr. versus Ben 1. And don't get me wrong, obviously your goal is to build up these names to become like superstars, but I feel like when with signing, like, I feel like when you're signing, you at least want to try and find some boxers to headline your events that have like lucrative or that have like value to them. I'm looking at their catalogue of fighters right now. The only one I see on their list of names that I think could actually do numbers well, at least, is Conor Benn. Speaking of Conor Benn, that leads me on to probably my biggest issue with ZUFFA as a whole, in my opinion. So yeah, going into this, I honestly thought ZUFFA was probably this boxing league or whatever they want. I honestly thought going into it they were going to be working with promotional companies in order to try and make great fights all the time, cut through the politics, and simply just have the Ring Magazine belt as the true world title fight, or the true belt, and like while you can definitely gain value out of all these other belts, the Ring Magazine belt was seen as the true belt. But personally, actually not personally because it doesn't affect me, but they've basically refused to work with the promotional companies who ultimately have all the big names that they kind of need to make this work. And worst part is they've even had to like steal fighters from them in order to make this work. Like, obviously we most recently had the thing with Conor Benn sacking off Matchroom to work with ZUFFA. And don't get me wrong, apparently his upcoming fight with Regis Prograis is paying him more money than he got for either his first or second fight with Chris Eubank Jr. But I feel like, if anything, by not working with promotional companies and instead stripping them of their fighters in order to build up, I feel like, if anything, you're just ruining other people's careers. Like Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren, they're possibly gonna end up losing their like whole business in boxing for you to make this work, which I just don't feel like it's really that necessary, especially considering that you look at what Turkey's done, being able to work with the promotional companies. Like, he's worked with them in the past, and we've gotten so many good events. Like, we've got we had the 5v5 card between Queensberry and Matchroom. We had 2 fights between Usyk and Fury. We had 2 fights between Bivol and Beterbiev. We had Canelo Crawford. We have... What else do we have? We had some great ring fights as well. Like he helped promote the Chris Eubank Conor Benn fights. he helped with Hamza Shiraz versus Edgar Berlanga, as well as Shakur Stevenson versus William Zepeda, which was a great event. He did the Day of Reckoning card, which was an absolute banger. You have and even with also events like Last Crescendo, Ring of Fire, there's been so many bangers on the undercards as well, and it was through getting all these promotional companies together for the first time and actually working things out between them in order to take risks and even give the fighters the money they want to take risks. And personally, I feel like they should have just continued doing that, but instead they are basically in my opinion, I feel like they actually are kind of ruining the promoters' careers. Though, they obviously recently took Conor Benn, which is probably one of, if not Eddie Hearn's most financially lucrative fighters. I'm sure he has more, but it was probably also his most lucrative prospect, who he's helped the hell out of, even going as far as to defend his drug tests or drug bans. I don't know. I just personally don't see why they need to not work with the promoters. You could have done the same thing just if you had just talked to them and worked things out, or whatever. Turkey's already done that. You've already established something. Just continue doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I just personally feel like all this is I just don't really see what was the problem with doing that. So I don't know. Ooh, this is going to be a long video to edit, but look, guys, I really hope ZUFFA worked, and don't get me wrong, I think it's working out really well right now. They put on some good fights, and I'm sure, and they've got some really good names that could end up being some superstars that can help build out ZUFFA and really actually bring back boxing in a way. But I don't know. I just feel like there is a lot of stuff they've done which I just personally don't really think is the right way to do it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. And I know some of you will probably disagree with me, but I don't care. It's my channel. I make the rules. Anyway, see you guys later. Take care. Bye.